My sister accidentally sent me a video of the family calling me a pathetic piggy bank. I stayed silent, then called in every loan I'd given them and watched them panic for months. So there I, 31 May, was sitting in my double wide after pulling a 14-hour shift fixing power lines in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Idaho. We'd had 3 transformers blow during an ice storm. Hard work, but it pays $78,000 a year with overtime, full benefits, and a pension. My trailer sits on 2 acres outside Idaho Falls. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. No mortgage, no roommates, no bullshit. Just me, my tools, and enough space to work on my truck without neighbors complaining about the noise. I was cracking open my second Coors Light, still in my work clothes, when my phone buzzed. Lucy's name popped up with a video attachment. Lucy's my sister, about as tech-savvy as a brick. So getting a video from her usually means someone's either dead, drunk, or her kid did something stupid enough to make the local news. I propped my boots up on the coffee table and hit play, expecting to see her youngest falling off his bike, or maybe her dog getting into the garbage again. The first 10 seconds were just shaky footage of what looked like my parents' kitchen table. I could hear voices but couldn't make out what they were saying. She probably didn't even realize she was recording. But then the image stabilized, and I heard my mom's voice, crystal clear. Luke thinks he's so important with his little power company job. Like stringing up wires makes him special or something. My drink stopped halfway to my mouth. The cold bottle started sweating in my grip as I realized what I was watching. Then my dad jumped in with that condescending laugh I'd been hearing my whole life. Kid's got no backbone whatsoever. Wave a sob story in his face and he opens his wallet like a trained seal. Pathetic, really. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. They were talking about me, and they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. My brother Sam, who hasn't worked a real job since Obama was president and spends most of his time drinking beer and playing Xbox, chimed in. The best part is, he actually feels good about helping us. Like he's some kind of family hero saving everyone. Dumbass doesn't realize we're just bleeding him dry. They all erupted in laughter, like Sam had just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest joke. I could hear someone clinking bottles in the background. Then Lucy's voice came through clear as day. Luke's such a freaking pushover. Remember when I told him I needed grocery money for the kids and he sent me $400? I bought that new TV with it. More laughter. He's too stupid to figure it out. As long as I mention the kids, he'll send whatever I ask for. I had to replay that part twice because my brain couldn't process what I was hearing. The TV? The freaking 55-inch smart TV she'd claimed her husband bought for their anniversary. The one she'd shown off on Facebook with some bullshit post about, blessed to have such a thoughtful husband. I paid for that TV. I bought her family a TV while I was eating ramen noodles for dinner 4 nights a week to save money. The video kept rolling. Mom started talking about the vacation money I'd loaned them last year. Luke thinks we used that money to fix the roof. We went to Cancun instead, and he never even noticed. The video finally cut off, and I sat there like a statue, drink getting warm in my hand. Then I saw the notification that made everything perfect. This message has been unsent. Lucy had realized her screw-up. She was probably scrambling right now, praying to whatever God watches over lying pieces of shit that I hadn't seen her accidental confession video. OMG, Luke, that was by mistake. Please never mind it. Don't worry. You didn't see the video, right? I might did. She left this on scene, probably realizing how screwed she was. I replayed the video 3 more times, making sure I caught every word. Each viewing made it worse. These weren't strangers talking shit at some bar. These were the people who raised me. The people I'd been supporting financially for 6 years, while living like a monk, because family comes first. The people who called me their rock and their blessing when they needed money. The people who sent me birthday cards, talking about how proud they were of me. The people who'd spent Christmas dinner last year toasting what a good son and brother I was. That's when I remembered something important, something that was about to make their lives very interesting. I don't give gifts. I give loans, with signed agreements. And I keep every piece of paper like it's a goddamn treasure map. I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled out the fireproof filing cabinet where I keep all my important documents. Birth certificate, military discharge papers, truck title, insurance policies, and a manila folder labeled Family Loans that was about 2 inches thick. Every loan agreement I'd ever written was in there, organized by date and borrower. Every promissory note they'd signed while promising to pay me back as soon as things turned around. As I flipped through the papers, one thing became crystal clear. My family had just screwed around with the wrong useful idiot. Here's the thing. When you work with enough voltage to fry a small town, you learn that assumptions kill people. Document everything. Trust nothing. Always have backups. That mindset becomes a way of life. Same anal retentive habits that keep me from getting electrocuted also made me the most organized loan shark in town. Every single emergency I'd helped my family with came with paperwork. Every single one. It started 6 years ago when Dad's truck needed a new transmission. $1,500 he didn't have. I wasn't going to hand over that money with a handshake and a prayer, so I wrote up a promissory note. Amount borrowed, 6% interest, payment schedule, signatures. Just keeping things professional, Dad. He laughed it off. Whatever makes you feel better, son. I'll have this paid back in 2 months anyway. Should have known 2 months was Dad speak for never. The transmission loan became the template for the next 6 years. Mom needed mortgage help during her rough patch. $2,500. Sam needed rent money. $1,200. Lucy needed money for the kids' medical bills. $2,800. Each time they signed happily because they figured I'd never enforce anything. But I didn't just keep the signed contracts. I kept everything. Screenshots of every text promising repayment. Voice recordings of sob story voicemails. Email chains where they laid on the guilt while swearing they'd make things right. 6 years of documented lies and broken promises. I tracked it all in spreadsheets like a real lending operation. Principal amounts, interest accrued, payment dates, actual payments received. A lot of freaking zeros. The damage? Sam owed me $9,200. Mom and Dad were into me for $14,800 combined. Lucy had borrowed $8,600, plus another $3,000 in cash expenses I'd covered over the years. Total legitimate loans, $35,600 in principal. With compound interest, we were looking at about $52,000 in total debt. $52,000. That's my entire financial cushion they'd been pissing away while calling me a trained SEAL. Time to find out what useful idiot actually means when the idiot has better documentation than most banks. The morning after watching my family's little comedy special, I called in sick to work. My first call was to my buddy Martin. We'd served together in Afghanistan before I got out and learned the lineman trade. Martin stayed in and now fixes helicopters for the National Guard, which means he understands both precision engineering and the importance of total annihilation when someone crosses you. Martin lives about 20 minutes away in a house he bought with his VA loan. We usually grab beers every couple weeks and bitch about work, but this wasn't a social call. Dude, you sound like someone pissed in your cereal, Martin said when he answered. I told him about the video. About 6 years of being financially bled dry while my family laughed about what a pushover I was. About discovering that every sob story had been bullshit and every promise to pay me back had been a lie. He listened without interrupting. Luke, you've been talking about this shit for years, he said when I finished. Every time we hang out, you're complaining about how much money your family owes you. I kept telling you to do something about it. I thought they'd eventually pay me back. You thought wrong. These people have been playing you like a freaking piano. Time to collect. You need a lawyer who specializes in debt collection. Someone who eats deadbeats for breakfast and shits out liens. He gave me the number for this attorney, who'd helped him during his divorce when his ex tried to hide assets. According to Martin, this lawyer had found money the ex didn't even know she had and extracted every penny. I met with the attorney the next day. She looked over my documentation like she was reading a blueprint for financial destruction, and I could tell she was impressed with my organizational skills. Turns out, my contracts were legally bulletproof. Signed, dated, witnessed, with clear terms for interest and repayment. My family had agreed to commercial lending terms, and they'd been in default for months. The attorney ran the numbers and explained what scorched earth debt collection actually looked like. We could pursue wage garnishment, asset seizure, liens on real property, the full nuclear option. With principal, accrued interest, legal fees, and court costs, we were looking at about $70,000 in total recovery. $70,000. Enough to buy a reliable truck with cash. Enough to put a serious dent in a house down payment. Enough to financially devastate the people who'd been calling me a useful idiot while living off my generosity. Before my lawyer could even file the first piece of paperwork, my phone started blowing up like a 4th of July fireworks show. Apparently, Lucy had confessed her screw-up to the family matriarch, my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol is one of those people who peaked in high school and has spent the last 30 years trying to relive her glory days as head cheerleader and class president. She's also been broke as shit for most of her adult life, but acts like she's dispensing financial wisdom from some kind of economic mountaintop. Her husband Dave works construction when the weather's good and drinks when it's not. They live in a double wide that's somehow shittier than mine, but Carol talks like she's running a family dynasty instead of barely keeping the lights on. She called me on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work, using that condescending tone she breaks out when she thinks she's about to school someone on proper behavior. Luke, honey, I heard about this little misunderstanding with the family loans. No misunderstanding, Carol. They borrowed money and haven't made a single payment. Pretty straightforward. Now, sweetheart, you know family money is different than bank money. These aren't strangers we're talking about. Your parents raised you, sacrificed for you, put a roof over your head for 18 years. They deserve a little help in their golden years. Carol, they signed legal contracts promising to repay money they borrowed. I'm holding them to those contracts. But honey, you're being so rigid about this, so businesslike. Family should forgive and forget, especially when it comes to money. Money isn't more important than blood. Here's the thing about Carol that makes her lecture particularly rich. She spent her entire adult life borrowing money from relatives and never paying it back. She owes my parents about $4,000 from various emergencies over the years. Carol, when's the last time you paid my parents back the money you borrowed for your car repairs? Dead silence. I could practically hear her brain scrambling for an excuse. Or the money for your daughter's wedding? That was what, 3 years ago? Or your husband's medical bills from when he fell off that roof? More silence. Right. So maybe save the family forgiveness lecture for someone who hasn't heard you make the exact same promises you're asking me to accept. You're being mean, Luke. I'm being realistic. She hung up on me, but this was just the opening act. By the time I got to work, I had 6 missed calls and 12 text messages from various family members who'd apparently been briefed on the situation. Mom went with guilt. Luke, I can't believe you're doing this to us. We're your parents. We love you more than anything. Dad tried reasoning. Son, let's sit down and talk about this man to man. I'm sure we can work something out that makes everyone happy. Sam went straight to threats. This is bullshit, Luke. You better back off before you regret it. But Carol wasn't done with her flying monkey routine. She'd apparently appointed herself as the family spokesperson and was mounting a full-scale campaign to get me to drop the legal action. She called me again that evening, this time with backup. I could hear voices in the background, which meant she'd assembled a committee of concerned relatives to gang up on me. Luke, honey, I've got your cousin Jennifer here and your Uncle Jared, and we're all very concerned about this situation. Uncle Jared, who'd borrowed $2,000 from me 4 years ago for truck repairs and never mentioned it again. Concerned about what? People paying back money they borrowed? Concerned about you destroying the family over money issues that could be resolved with a little understanding and compromise. Jared's voice came through the speaker. Luke, your aunt's right. This isn't how family handles disagreements. Jared, you still owe me $2,000 from 2020. When are you planning to pay that back? The background voices went quiet. That's different, Jared stammered. It's exactly the same. You borrowed money, promised to pay it back, and didn't. Just like everyone else. Carol jumped back in. Luke, you're missing the point. Family takes care of family. We help each other out without keeping score like some kind of accountant. I've been helping family for 6 years while everyone else kept score of how much they could get away with. Now it's my turn to do some accounting. But honey, taking people to court? Hiring lawyers? That's so hostile. Sure. The call lasted another 20 minutes, with various relatives taking turns trying to convince me that family bonds were more important than legal contracts. None of them volunteered to pay back their own outstanding debts, of course. They just wanted me to forget about mine. By the time I hung up, I was more convinced than ever that legal action was the right move. Time to teach these people that useful idiots sometimes have lawyers. Within a week of Carol's intervention squad, the whole family had mobilized like I'd declared war on Christmas itself, which, in their minds, I basically had. They'd been counting on Luke ATM for their holiday shopping, vacation funds, and general lifestyle maintenance. Now their cash cow was talking about contracts and lawyers. Sam tried the intimidation route first. He showed up at my work site on a Wednesday morning with 2 of his unemployed drinking buddies. I was 40 feet up on a power pole replacing insulators when I spotted them standing next to my truck. I finished installing the insulator and climbed down slowly, taking my sweet time because watching Sam try to look tough while standing next to a utility truck was hilarious. Luke, we need to talk, Sam said, trying to puff out his chest. No, we don't. You need to get the hell off before I call security. This bullshit with the lawyers has to stop. You're screwing with the wrong people. I looked at Sam's backup squad and tried not to laugh. Which people am I screwing with exactly? The unemployed meth head or the guy who looks like he weighs 90 pounds soaking wet? The guy Brad took a step forward like he was going to do something, but I pointed at the utility truck with Idaho Power logos all over it. Brad, you're standing on federal utility property threatening a power company employee. That's 2 felonies before lunch. You really want to test how fast the sheriff's department responds to calls about people threatening electrical workers? He looked around nervously. We're not threatening anybody, Sam said, though he'd literally just told me I was screwing with the wrong people. Sam, you just told me to stop the legal action before things get ugly? What exactly did you think ugly meant? Interpretive dance? His brain took a few seconds to process that he'd just confessed to making threats. His backup dancers started looking at each other like they were realizing they'd driven to a federal utility site to help their friend intimidate a guy who works with high-voltage electricity for a living. Look, just think about what you're doing, okay? We're family. This is going to hurt everyone. Yup, I'm doing. They climbed back into Sam's car and drove away without further commentary. But Sam's amateur hour intimidation was just the warm-up act. Over the next few days, each family member tried their own approach to getting me to back down. Mom tried the emotional manipulation route, calling me that evening with a voice full of tears and disappointment. Dad showed up at my trailer the next evening with a six-pack of Budweiser and his man-to-man voice, like we were going to hash this out over a couple drinks and some bonding. And Lucy? She tried a different tactic entirely. She sent her kids to guilt trip me, 8 and 10 years old, showing up at my trailer with a handwritten note about how Mommy says Uncle Luke doesn't love us anymore because of money problems. I sent them home with a different note. Tell Mommy that Uncle Luke's bank is finally closed. But the real masterpiece was when they all decided to stage a family intervention. Mom, Dad, Sam, Lucy, and Carol, all packed into my tiny living room like some kind of deadbeat clown car on a Tuesday night. I came home from work to find them sitting in my living room like they owned the place. Carol had apparently used the spare key Mom had from when she used to feed my cat during work trips. What the hell are you people doing in my house? Luke, we're here because we love you and we're concerned, Mom started. Bullshit. You're here because I'm collecting money you owe me, and it's inconvenient for you. Carol jumped in. Honey, this obsession with money is unhealthy. Carol, you literally borrowed $1,200 from me last Christmas for emergency dental work and bought a hot tub instead. Don't lecture me about unhealthy obsessions with money. The room went quiet. Sam tried to salvage the intervention with his usual brilliant logic. Look, Luke, we get that you're pissed, but taking us to court is too far. There's got to be a better way to handle this. There is. Pay me back the money you borrowed. We don't have it. Then you shouldn't have borrowed it. Lucy started crying, because that's Lucy's go-to move when logic fails her. They tried arguing for another hour, cycling through every manipulation tactic in the deadbeat family playbook. I just sat there drinking and watching them perform like it was dinner theater with worse acting and higher stakes. Finally, I stood up and pointed at the door. All right, here's how this works. You've got 30 days to arrange payment on your outstanding debts. Full payment, including accrued interest. After that, my lawyer files collection actions, and this gets expensive for everybody. You can't do this to your family, Mom pleaded, tears streaming down her face. Watch me. We'll fight this, Sam said, trying to salvage some dignity. We'll get our own lawyer. These contracts probably aren't even legal. Go for it. Good luck finding a judge who thinks family relationships exempt you from honoring your debts. They filed out of my trailer looking like someone had just explained compound interest to them, which, technically, I had. The 30-day deadline came and went with zero payments from anyone. Not even a token $50 gesture to show good faith. Time for the nuclear option. My lawyer moved fast once the 30-day grace period expired. She'd spent the waiting period preparing her attack like a general planning an invasion. Process servers were lined up, court filings were ready, and asset searches had been completed on all 4 defendants. The papers got served on a Monday morning at 8 a.m. sharp. By 9 a.m., my phone started ringing like it was on fire. Sam called first, screaming about how this was illegal harassment, and he was going to sue everyone involved, including the freaking process server. This is bullshit! These contracts aren't real! They're real enough that you signed them. Mom called next, sobbing about how they can't afford lawyers, and this was going to destroy them financially. Luke, please, there has to be another way. Call my lawyer if you want to discuss payment arrangements. I'm done negotiating. Lucy tried the victim route, sobbing about how her kids would suffer because of my greed, and how could I destroy innocent children over money? Your kids are going to suffer because you spent their college fund on coach purses and girls' trips. But the real entertainment started when they tried to lawyer up. Turns out, most attorneys won't take on clients who are obviously screwed from the start, especially when the opposing party has ironclad documentation and a debt collection specialist with a reputation for never losing and never settling. They spent 2 weeks calling every lawyer in eastern Idaho, getting the same response everywhere. We've reviewed your case and don't feel we can provide effective representation, which is lawyer speak for, you're screwed and we don't want to waste our time. They finally found some strip mall attorney willing to take their case, some guy who advertised on bus benches and late-night cable TV. His office was wedged between a check-cashing place and a bail bondsman, which should have been their first clue about his success rate. This lawyer wanted an $8,000 retainer split 4 ways among the defendants. Money they didn't have because they'd spent the last 6 years living off loans they never intended to repay. Sam had to borrow money from his drinking buddies to cover his share. Mom and Dad took out a payday loan at 400% interest. Lucy sold her wedding ring and some jewelry to raise the cash. Their lawyer's strategy was basically to argue that family loans shouldn't be enforceable in court. My lawyer's response was to present signed contracts and ask the judge if family members get special exemptions from honoring their legal obligations. The judge was not impressed with their argument, but they weren't done fighting. They tried one more play that almost made me respect their creativity, if not their intelligence. They attempted to declare bankruptcy, all 4 of them, coordinated like some kind of financial suicide pact designed to wipe out their debts and leave me holding the bag. The problem is, bankruptcy law isn't designed to help people escape the consequences of fraud. And spending loan money on luxury items while claiming financial hardship to borrow more money is textbook fraud. My lawyer presented evidence of their vacations, shopping sprees, and unnecessary purchases, all funded with money they'd borrowed from me while claiming to be broke. She had Facebook photos, credit card statements, and receipts showing exactly where my money had gone. The bankruptcy court wasn't just unimpressed, they were pissed. They dismissed all 4 petitions and referred the cases back to collections court with additional sanctions for attempting to discharge fraudulent debts. Now they owed me even more money in legal fees and court costs, plus penalties for filing frivolous bankruptcy petitions. Their lawyer withdrew from their case after the bankruptcy disaster, apparently deciding his reputation wasn't worth defending people who kept making his job harder. They were on their own, facing a debt collection attorney with a perfect track record and a plaintiff who had better documentation than most banks. The final court hearing was set for a Thursday morning in November, which meant I had to take another day off work to watch my family get legally destroyed by their own signatures. My family sat at the defendant's table without an attorney, since their lawyer had abandoned ship after the bankruptcy fiasco. They decided to represent themselves, which is like performing surgery on yourself. The judge looked like he'd seen every scam, sob story, and bullshit excuse in the legal system. My lawyer laid out the case like a prosecutor going after organized crime, walking through each contract and highlighting the key terms. Principal amounts, interest rates, payment schedules, signature dates, all documented in excruciating detail. Then she moved to the payment history, which was basically 4 years of zeros with occasional promises to start paying next month. But the real destruction came when she presented evidence of what they'd actually done with the borrowed money. Facebook photos of vacations they'd claimed were business trips, credit card receipts for luxury purchases made while claiming they couldn't afford basic necessities, bank statements showing cash withdrawals that coincided with my loan payments, followed immediately by purchases of non-essential items. The judge looked at my family like they were something he'd scraped off his shoe. Sam tried to argue that the contracts were unfair because he didn't understand the legal language. My lawyer pointed out that the contracts were written in plain English and he'd had ample time to ask questions before signing. Mom attempted to claim that the loans were really gifts because of our family relationship. My lawyer presented the signed agreements and asked if gift recipients typically sign promissory notes with interest rates and payment schedules. Dad tried to argue that he'd always intended to pay me back and just needed more time. My lawyer presented 6 years of missed payments and broken promises as evidence that his intentions and his actions didn't align. The judge didn't even deliberate. He awarded me judgment for the full amount owed, plus accrued interest, court costs, and attorney fees. The total came to $68,000, split 4 ways, but each of them jointly and severally liable for the full amount. My lawyer immediately filed for asset seizure, wage garnishment, and property liens. The look on their faces was worth every penny of the legal fees. Sam tried to appeal the judgment, but appeals cost money and require legal grounds beyond, "This isn't fair." The appeals court took one look at the signed contracts and upheld the original ruling while awarding me additional attorney fees for having to defend against a frivolous appeal. They were officially screwed. What happened next was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Everything fell apart in exactly the order you'd expect when people who've been living beyond their means suddenly lose access to their primary source of income. Sam felt the first wave because Sam always lived closest to the edge of financial disaster. When you're unemployed and living off odd jobs, wage garnishment is impossible, but asset seizure is pure gold. The court identified Sam's most valuable possession, a 2018 Mustang GT he'd bought with money borrowed for rent. $15,000 of my money turned into a bright red sports car that spent more time in his driveway than on the road because he couldn't afford insurance or gas. The repo crew showed up at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, professional as hell, and completely unsympathetic to Sam's protests about how they were stealing his car. Sam called me from the parking lot of his apartment complex, screaming like someone had murdered his firstborn child. "Luke, they took my freaking car! You can't do this shit to me!" "They didn't steal your car, Sam. The court ordered asset seizure to satisfy your debt. That car was bought with my money anyway." "It's my car! I've been making payments!" "You've been making payments to the bank with money I loaned you. Technically, I've been making your car payments for 2 years. This is screwed up! I need that car for work." "Sam, you don't have a job. And if you did have a job, maybe you could have used your paychecks to pay me back instead of buying a sports car you couldn't afford." The Mustang sold at auction for $11,000. After auction fees, storage costs, and legal expenses, it covered most of what Sam owed me. He still had about $3,000 hanging over his head, plus ongoing interest that kept accruing every month. He tried to hide his remaining assets by transferring everything to his roommate's name. My lawyer caught the fraudulent transfers immediately and had them reversed by the court. He got held in contempt and spent a weekend in county jail thinking about his choices. Meanwhile, Lucy was feeling the squeeze in a different way. Her husband Dave's construction business had been doing well, which meant plenty of wages to garnish. 25% of his take-home pay started flowing directly to the court to satisfy her debt. Dave was not pleased with this development. Turns out Dave hadn't known about most of the money Lucy had borrowed from me. He definitely hadn't known she'd been lying about what she spent it on. When he found out his wife had borrowed $8,600 for the kids' needs and spent it on shopping sprees and girls' trips, the marriage imploded faster than a controlled demolition. The divorce papers were filed within 6 weeks of the wage garnishment starting. Dave wanted half of everything, which would have been fair, except Lucy didn't have anything left to split. The court-ordered payments to me had already eaten into their savings and monthly budget. She went from suburban housewife with a 3-bedroom house to trailer park single mom with a wage garnishment in about 4 months. But mom and dad, that's where the real devastation happened. They'd been living in the same house for 24 years. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, decent neighborhood, about $80,000 in equity, or so they thought, until my lawyer's asset investigation revealed the truth. Turns out, they'd been taking home equity loans for years to fund their lifestyle. The Mexico vacation, $3,500. The kitchen remodel, $6,000. The new deck and hot tub, $4,500. Dad's fishing boat, $3,200. All financed through home equity loans that turned their house into an ATM. They owed about $140,000 against a house worth maybe $180,000 in the current market. Not bad equity, except for the $68,000 judgment lien that my lawyer had placed against the property. If they sold the house, the first $140,000 would go to paying off the existing mortgages. The next $40,000 would go to me. They'd walk away with nothing and still owe me about $28,000. They couldn't refinance because the judgment lien made them untouchable to any legitimate lender. They couldn't borrow against the equity because there wasn't any equity left after my lien. And they couldn't afford the existing payments plus the additional liability from wage garnishment. Foreclosure was inevitable. The bank started proceedings in March. Mom called me crying about how they were losing everything because of my greed. "Mom, you're losing everything because you borrowed money you couldn't repay while lying about your financial situation." "We never lied. You told me you needed money for roof repairs and spent it on a vacation to Cancun. If that's not lying, what is it?" "We were going to fix the roof later." "With what money?" "You'd already spent every penny I gave you." She hung up on me, but called back an hour later to ask if there was any way to work something out. "Sure. Pay me the $68,000 you owe me and I'll release the lien." "But you know we don't have that kind of money." "Then you know what's going to happen next." The foreclosure sale was set for June. Martin drove by their house one afternoon and texted me a photo of the foreclosure sale sign in their front yard. He added, "Merry Christmas in July. That's Martin for you." Emotional support through documentation of your enemy's destruction. The house sold at foreclosure auction for $174,000, which was about $6,000 less than market value. After paying off the existing mortgages and legal fees, there was $28,000 left. That money went directly to me as partial payment on their debt, which still left them owing about $40,000 plus ongoing interest. Mom and Dad moved into a two-bedroom apartment across town, both of them working full-time for the first time in years, with 25% of every paycheck going directly to the court. Sam never figured out how to dig himself out of the hole. Last I heard from Martin, he was working at a Pizza Hut and living in a studio apartment that looked like a prison cell with a kitchenette. The garnishment takes a quarter of his minimum wage paychecks, which means he'll be paying me for approximately the rest of his natural life. Lucy got a job at a call center, handling customer complaints for a cable company, which seems fitting since she'd become a complaint herself. She rented a double wide with her two kids and learned what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck while a quarter of those paychecks disappear into legal judgments. By this point, it had been almost a year since I discovered their little confession. The initial rush of righteous anger had settled into something more like satisfaction. The call came on a Thursday night in February. Mom's number, which I'd stopped ignoring because watching them grovel had become entertaining. "Honey, we need to talk." "About what? You ready to pay me back?" "Luke, please. We can't keep living like this. The garnishments, the apartment, working two jobs each just to survive. We're old. We can't do this for the rest of our lives." "Too late. We're sorry. We're so sorry about what we said. We never meant to hurt you. You're sorry you got caught saying it. What do you want from us? What will it take to make this stop?" For almost a year, I'd been waiting for someone in my family to ask that question, to actually acknowledge what they'd done, instead of making excuses and playing victim. "I want what I've always wanted, the money you borrowed, with interest, like you promised when you signed the contracts. Luke, at this rate, we'll never pay it off. We're 60 years old, working minimum wage jobs, living in poverty. Even if we give you every penny for the next 10 years, we'll still owe money because of the interest. Then you'll work for 10 years, or 15, or however long it takes. We'll do anything. Please, just tell us what you want." I thought about that for a long moment. "I want you to remember this feeling for the rest of your lives, Luke, and I want you to understand that I will never, ever trust any of you again." She was crying by the time I hung up, but I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no regret. Just the satisfaction of watching people face the consequences of their own choices. Martin came by the next evening with a six-pack. "Dude, your mom called my mom crying about how you're destroying the family," he said, cracking open a drink. "My mom told her that families don't destroy themselves. They just stop pretending everything's fine." We sat on my porch drinking and watching the sunset over the mountains. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. No guilt about family obligations, no stress about being someone's personal ATM, no wondering when the next emergency would require my financial intervention. Just the satisfaction of knowing that useful idiots sometimes turn out to be smarter than the people trying to use them. My family had learned the hard way that family relationships don't exempt you from basic financial responsibility. And me? I learned that sometimes the best way to help people is to stop helping them get away with their bullshit.